everyone, good morning. I have Laura and Cristian from NetMinds this morning, and we're going to talk about community. And I think this is the most excellent way to do it. The best part of waking up is talking to NetMinds in the morning, you know, at least for me. It's mid-morning for you guys. I think it's still dark outside for me, but that's all right. You know, you guys were worth getting up for. So let's get a little bit of an introduction to who you are. What is NetMinds? Who is Cristian? Who is Laura? And why did you decide to start a company?
Oh my God, I love how you asked the question. You know, like,
Why
did you decide to start a company?
With emphasis.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I think I'll start with a little bit of a summary about myself, because for me, it was a big change. I'm a journalist originally. I was a radio host for a while. And then I worked.
So you should be doing my job, actually. That's great. Keep going. Journalism. That's awesome.
And yeah, there was one thing when I was working in radio, and is that I had a program that it was called like International Living Room. And it was basically about interviewing researchers about the innovations that they were doing. So I started getting very interested into that, and I got passionate about talking to them. You know, the way I was doing it, it was like I was reading a newspaper, and then I was like, oh, that's so cool, I want to look for that person. And then I was doing the production and then talking with that person. So at some point I was like, I don't want to be the one doing just the interviews. I want to do something. And that was when I was working in radio. Then I went to advertising and everything about creativity and doing things. And then I remember like I was working like retail store kind of thing, like, and I was doing the advertising for them, and everything started just being horrible in the process. So I started seeing how technology could be a way of kind of like shortcutting processes and everything. But then whenever I was trying to kind of like say that, it was like, no, like this is how the process are. And I was like, no. So I started getting very frustrated about like how things were happening and how I was seeing innovation and all those things very far away. And I wanted to be there. So I think that's kind of like the story behind why I'm here.
Excellent.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it's, very different, because obviously I was not in the marketing and communication side, but I was more in the project management side. So I used to work in a bank, in a financial corporation, the largest one in Colombia, where we are from.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell. That's awesome.
Exactly. But what was amazing about the last 5 years that I was working there is that we were always talking about ecosystems. We were always talking about how could we create from the bank, from a financial corporation, an ecosystem for all our customers. That the customers were not thinking about going to the bank to get a loan, but they were going to the bank because they were solving a problem for their life. So we wanted to create this ecosystem with a lot of startups, with a lot of SMEs. So what we did was we started to create partnerships with all these companies to try to deliver a value for each part of a person's life. So when a baby is born, you go to the bank because we can provide all of these things.
Wow.
Obviously, a bank, and that was an amazing concept for me. Could you imagine, like the first thing after having a baby, going to the bank?
I mean, yes, and you're going to be doing that for the rest of your life, as I can attest.
Exactly. But when that started, I started to realize, okay, this is amazing about putting all these parties together, right? And starting to get this relationship with these innovative people, right? All these founders. So with each, I was in charge of doing the prototype for each one of those partnerships. So I had at the same time like 11 prototypes building with all these startups. So for me, just seeing that, I wanted to be in that other side. I didn't want to be in the corporation side.
The one where you brought the baby to the bank, or? I mean, there's a story in there, I'm sure. So it's interesting that you mentioned one thing that I think a lot of people kind of miss. You know, we always look at banks, or we look at institutions, or choose your object or business, right? We always look at it going there and doing something with it. You mentioned that people would come to the bank to solve a problem. You know, and I think it's interesting, and it's key because, you know, when we talk about communities, which we're going to talk about in just a second, it's kind of your value proposition, if you will. You know, communities are formed around common interests, right?
Yeah.
You know, we can distill these massive sociological definitions of communities, and trust me, I've got a stack of it. That's that white paper that's up on my desk. It's just research and research. Drives you crazy. But we can distill all these, you know, complex definitions of what communities are, but down into really basic things. And like you're saying, people would come to this bank, this organization, to solve problems. And around that, you started to notice that collection. So that really was the genesis, if I may say that, of, you know, this idea. We want to work with communities. Is that a correct assumption on your part?
Yeah, I mean, from my side, I think for Chris, it was very clear from that side, because I didn't know anything about innovation. You know, like for me, it was a whole new world. And the way I started getting more into communities was first because of my social passion, let's say it that way, like the reason why I started studying communications, but it was about the concept of open innovation. So I remember that when I was doing a master's in innovation, I saw the open innovation concept, and I was like, companies cannot solve all problems by themselves. They need other people. Mm-hmm. But how they find other people? Because competition seems to be a bigger thing than collaboration or working together. So I think yes, it comes from like, it's solving a problem for people, but I think from the ecosystems that Chris was saying as well, is like how you solve a problem, a better problem, let's say that way, or a bigger problem when you're working with someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's something additional about what you were saying now, that interest, right? The interest that puts the community together. And actually, because we did a prototype in March, trying to connect the startups in the proper program and around with mentors and professionals that will help. And there's one thing that we have always seen in the community, that we saw it there in our own experiment, and is that the purpose is very important. So obviously when you start seeing a community, for example, for us, it was the purpose of, okay, I need to grow my company. I want to have an innovative concept. But when we started to see other communities, each one had their own purpose. So the important thing was that everyone was connected with their purpose. And when everyone in the community is connected with that purpose, it's very easy for everyone to start helping each other, right? When that's clear, when it's specific and clear.
I think we had talked, you know, it was one of the first conversations after I had met you guys in March, was around that kind of organic community. Actually, you had surprised me with something that you had said, and I'd like to dive into it. And again, in this massively changed world since March, even, you know, you're like, Dave, things changed. You know, like there was a point where, you know, again, your original idea of connecting communities of people to their interests, and then, you know, kind of building communities out that. You had made a comment, Cristian, about the expectations that you had changed, right? You came to a point where there was I won't say the interest changed, but the dynamics around how that interest was manifested changed. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And Laura, I'd want your perspective on that too, because you obviously have a different mindset, which is great. There's complementary, you know, natures there. So tell me about that pivot, that inflection point that you found kind of post-March, where people wanted to do, you know, the people that you expected to do things were not the people that ultimately ended up joining the community. So I think that's the exciting part for me.
Okay. You remember that. Yeah.
Of course. It was foundational. I mean, this is part of my excitement on this side as well. I got to hear these stories. I want people to hear this.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, because obviously when we started, we saw a problem in not just the startups that needed help, and you were a pre-seed company. You don't have money to develop or to improve your product. And then we saw, okay, there is the furlough scheme, right? All these people in their houses receiving like financial support, but not being able to deliver value to the community. So what we thought is, okay, what if we could connect these people to give at least a few hours of their time to these startups? So yes, it was amazing because we started to do it and we were really frustrated that they were not signing up. But what happened is, without us thinking about it, And this is the amazing thing about these experiments, is that the responses that you get are not always, I mean, I think almost never the one you expected, but it's much better than what you predicted, right? Because what happened is the people who were busier, like who were more busy, the people who already had a job, who had already a good position in a company, they were just grateful about what they had, and they wanted to give back. So those are the ones who started to look for us, saying, wait, I want to help. I want to connect with the purpose of the company. So what started to happen there, and that was the switch, because initially it was just matching skills or abilities to a startup. Now it was matching the skills, abilities, and purpose. So these people, what they were saying is, I want to connect to a startup, but I want the concept to be about sustainability, because that's what I care about. I want it to be about diversity, because that's what I care about. So that's where we started to see that trait of, okay, the purpose is even more critical to do the connection than even the skills and the ability.
Yeah, and I will add there that another very interesting thing was that people were saying, in my job, I do partnerships, let's call it that way. But I have a passion for animals and I know a lot about animals, but there's no way I can add that to somewhere because, I mean, I cannot do it in my job, but then there was a startup working with animals. Awesome.
So you really became you really didn't lose the overall goal, which was connecting people to communities, right? That never disappeared, but it was really the thread that we use to connect people together, or that you use to connect people together. So how is that in the months since, since it's been like middle of September now, I can't even,
yeah.
This year, this 2020 is endless. It's like the millennia that won't disappear. Exciting challenges nonetheless. So how have you seen that kind of manifest itself out now? Like you talked about, now these folks that were already working, their day job, so to speak, now looking at additional augmentation of time, effort, energy, and excitement, really passion. How has that manifested itself now for you as NetMinds has moved forward? What have you seen, and how has that actually worked itself out? Are you seeing that passion and purpose kind of driving your business forward? I mean, truly, or are you seeing that initial peak of excitement kind of taper off a little bit? I think there's a normalization in there somewhere, and I don't want to spend too much time me talking about it. Is you seeing normalization curves? Are you seeing things change, or are you still seeing that level of excitement be there for, for these people, for anyone really coming into these communities of interest?
Yeah, there was something that we found, and is that we could find people and identify their purpose and match them together, but that was not necessarily generating a community, because then we were having people from different backgrounds, and indeed we were kind of like building the community of NetMinds, as in we are connecting people, but at the same time it was like with a lot of different backgrounds and so at some point it got hard for us to manage kind of like, what is it? But then we saw that actually there are some communities that are working towards how to build a community, but know on how they work, how members can connect better to each other, how members can keep that excitement that you were saying to kind of like talk to each other. So I think that was the point that we wanted really to understand and take all of those knowledges and give it to existing communities. So of course we still have NetMinds community, and we're working towards people getting connected and feeling that motivation and that passion. But we also saw that actually we needed to bring that excitement into already existing communities. So that's why we started with universities, for example, because we quickly found that they're trying to give support to their students. They're trying to give support to people to be inspired about doing things for community, the world, the economy, like all of those things. But that support is not scalable into some extent, because there's only one person kind of like motivating everyone. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're saying like, no, okay, you have these people, then let's motivate each other between each other. But for that, you have to find what we found before, that purpose. And yeah, that's the way I see it. I don't know how you envision it.
Yeah, and actually there is an additional point to add to that. It's about the awareness of people in a community of how can they help. So there was something interesting that we did, is that when we started to approach all these people, They were like, I had no idea I could deliver this value to a startup founder. Right? They were like, this is crazy. I didn't know that just from 1 hour of my advice. So, for example, a person just giving feedback on the US design of an app, or a person just with a little workshop on the branding of the company for 1 hour. The startup was saying, you were amazing for me. You brought me customers, you brought me growth. And for the person was like, with just 1 hour, I could do all of this. So there is something about, I mean, there is a whole discussion about what is mentoring, what is advice, what is consultancy.
Oh yeah.
That's.
Oh yeah.
That's.
I mean, we're here.
Right, exactly. But what was interesting is that, okay, so apart from all of those concepts, just your experience and knowledge can be connected to someone who really needs that help. So what we understood there is that, okay, we were doing it for the NetMinds community, but the NetMinds community was new, was something that was not grounded or something. We're trying to, there are already existing communities. The problem is that they don't find each other inside that community. So for example, the Propel alumni network is 300 people, right? But how did you connect those 300 people to help each other? You don't even know how to do it. You don't even know how to find them. So we say, okay, we found a way or a tool or a process to do it in our network. We say, okay, why don't we do it just in the existing networks, and then we start connecting them? That's how the concept has changed.
It's really interesting. I think, yeah, a lot of times we tend to look, especially as professionals, business professionals, right? If I can't throw my 8 hours of time at something, or a day, or if I can't travel and go, be there in person, then my efficacy is somehow blunted. And I think a lot of that's changed, right? We've certainly seen the modality of how we talk to people change. Like we spend time in Zoom now. Like we're developing these newer skill sets, right? We're making use of tools. I mean, I think what you've done is you've taken some of the tools that are out there. If for nothing else, you've reorganized and recategorized them, right? It's not a job posting board, like LinkedIn. I'll use LinkedIn as a terrible example of this. It tends to be like you throw something up there and be like, oh, that person's talking about some really cool stuff. But, there's no glue unless you take that action, right? And I think a lot of people, that hour, like you're saying, that golden hour that they have, the value of it, people have such interesting perspectives on what they're worth. A lot, from my background in counseling and psychology and working with people, people don't recognize the talents and abilities that they have. They think that's minimal if they don't see the immediate effect. That was always a challenge for me, even, like when you're counseling somebody, you want them to change immediately. I'm giving you the tools, go change, and if you didn't see that change right then and there, you got disheartened. There's always that disappointment because you couldn't see the effect of it right away. And I think that blunts a lot of people's efforts within communities as well. They don't see the immediate change. There's always that challenge curve, right? As to get to that peak of excitement, I still have to climb the hill, right? I still have to get up there. And that climb can be days, it can be weeks, it can be months. My excitement when you came to me and said, hey, from our conversation for 15 minutes, because it was literally 15 minutes around a table in the very noisy auditorium, with everybody else talking, like I took notes. Like, what are you talking about? I don't really remember what I said, but there was something that stuck there, which is huge, like, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that. And it was an honor to be there with you. But that 1 hour becomes multiplicative, right? That 1 hour changes someone's life. And I think one of the most impressive things now is that if I have an hour, if I have 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 minutes, I can actually impact change. I may not see it right away. I mean, look at us. 6 months later, we're having a conversation about the things that have changed. Like, how exciting is that? That's incredible. And we're going to have more conversations, which is even more incredible.
Yes, please.
But being able to kind of reinforce that with folks, I think, one of the things, and I'd love to hear how you want to kind of highlight those stories through NetMinds as well. I mean, how do you show people that their hour has meaning? Starting at the base level, if it's just an hour, how are you able to reflect back, whether it be through universities, through mentorships, through any other customers or partners that you have? How are you showing them their worth? And that's a loaded question. but how are you
Yeah.
planning on doing it?
Like, oh my God, how do I respond to this? I think gratitude, it's one thing. And it's like, you know, like right after a conversation, your mind gets like blocked. I mean, not blocked, but like you go like, and then you have to go and think, and then you're taking a shower, and then you process it. You know, like sometimes I wake up and I'm like, Chris, I had an idea. You remember that conversation we had yesterday? Or you start kind of like taking bits and pieces from this conversation, that conversation, that conversation. So I think it's a very hard question to answer because it's hard to manage that impact. But I think the fact that you have given people an interesting conversation, they found that they worth, you know, because at the end of the day, it's like if you're having something to talk about and then you have questions and you get answers, then there's definitely something that is happening there. Because if you have a question, you're looking for an answer. And if you get the answer, then you have something to reflect on and do something about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, as you were making the question, I was thinking about yesterday that we were with a customer. So we have a university that is a customer of us. We were working with the 21 companies that they have, an incubator, right? And something started to happen because what we did an exercise that we were doing a workshop on jobs to be done, but we also wanted to start engaging the cohorts, like the companies with each other. So what we did is that we divided the groups in groups, and I started to tell them, okay, you have to give feedback to each other. So it was interesting to see that people who already had a background in marketing also started to give advice to others in those groups. So actually, that's when they started to see, oh, wow, I can provide this advice and this person is listening to me. Yes. And the other one is like, can we talk later? Like, this is amazing what you were doing. But they had no idea before this meeting, they had been working for 2 weeks and they had no idea. They were just next to each other and they were not working. So what we saw there is that there is a way to make that support scalable. And is that you just need, and actually that's what we start doing, right? Is that we analyze the information of people in a network and we start suggesting those connections, right? Because that was the problem, is that you're not actively looking for, okay, who else in my network can help me? You just put away what you need, and what we do is that, so it's like we need to show them in a way, like in a systematic way, what is that can happen. And after it starts happening 1, 2, or 3 times, it's just start to grow organically.
Nice. Well, we're coming up on time here, and I've loved this. I think we're gonna put the mentor-mentee thing, I think, in the next episode.
Okay.
That works for you. I mean, they're all conversations. I think mentor-mentee is a very, very specific, you know, when we look at some of those dynamics, they change from a more broader scale community down to a more, you know, macro community, if you will, or micro community, something like that. We can use fancy words for it. What? Or I'll use the fancy words. I have no idea. I'll come up with something. When we look at NetMinds, where you guys are going, like you said, you met with 21 cohorts inside of a university, you know, in the university system. What's your excitement for the future? What do you see coming down the road for you guys in the next months or year? What's getting you up every morning outside of me? What's getting you up? Actually, yes. It's mid-morning. You were up long ago. What's getting you up every single morning? What's your passion, and where do you see yourself going with this?
Yeah, and that's a beautiful question, because actually we have started seeing that there are different types of communities, and there's one type of community that is built for people to help each other in the community because they need it, and they are in the community because they need people. So it's how we can tap in those communities and help people find each other and help people feel comfortable asking for help, and for people feeling confident giving help. You know, like it doesn't have to be fancy. You know, it can be like a question or an answer that it could be in a simple level. There's sometimes people just want to talk to somebody, they have a question. So it's how we empower those communities. So in corporations, a lot of people that could be answering questions to each other, universities, building companies, how they can answer questions to each other, co-working spaces, accelerators. you know, all of these communities that have been built for people to rely on each other and have different skill sets and mindsets to complement each other. Those are the communities that we're looking for, and that we want to empower them to feel comfortable asking help and giving help and find each other, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, we have been using a word lately that is support hacking. So you
Yeah.
usually mention growth hacking, like you use all these tools to grow your marketing and everything. So we have been talking about support hacking. And I think there is something interesting there. We were going through an experience that I have had, right? For example, I have had projects with 100 people of that scale, and had project with 5 people.
Yeah.
But what I see is that when I have the team of 5 people, I can provide the support that I as a leader to them. But when I had the project of 100 people, I was receiving at least one email from each one of them asking for something. And what I did was just trying to connect them with someone else in the organization that could help. So actually what we are seeing there is, okay, we're seeing a potential in every community that is just, the support is not enough because you're relying on a few people to do it, but you're not taking advantage of all the human capital you have inside us, right? We are seeing that limitation. So actually what drives us is we want to find all those communities. So as Laura was saying, these accelerators, corporations with these big
research institutes, you know, like everything that is building
exactly.
things.
But then how can we also connect them together, right? Because what we see is that, okay, maybe you cannot find the support in that community, maybe you can find it in near communities. So for example, as we're starting in a specific region in England, right? And we start connecting the universities with each other to help each other. So it's like, how do you help to fulfill all the human capital that you have inside that community, but also how can you connect with nearer communities? In that way, that's how we call it super hacking. So super hacking, right? You start hack that support, so each member of your community can get the help one-to-one from everyone on that area.
That's awesome. I love the way that you're approaching it. So human capital, support hacking, and communities. I don't know. I might have a title of this thing right there. No, this is incredible, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time. I have learned. I love learning through this process. So I have learned a lot from you guys in the past 6 months now. And I hope to learn more from you. And we're going to talk about mentors and mentees. We will talk again. I promise. But thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for your passion, your excitement for what you're doing and how you're enabling people to connect with each other. I think in a world that forces disconnection right now, especially socially, you know, and everything that we do, that need for us, we are social creatures, regardless of introversion, extroversion, you name it. We are social creatures. We need that connection. We need that support hacking, if you will, you know, to bring us all together. I like that. These things stick in my mind. You know, Ann Orr talked to me the other, you know, last week about pale, male, and stale, and I couldn't get that out of my head. You know, like these words that stick in there, and that's great. We'll make a meme or something. But thank you. What you're doing with NetMinds is incredible. I really appreciate all the work and effort that you put in there. You're doing a great thing for people. You know, never forget you're a startup. You're making money along the way. You're doing things that are growing your business, but you're also bringing other people up at the same time. And that's incredible. And that's a beautiful thing to see happen in this world. So thank you very much. Any last words? Anything?
The words are amazing. I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing.
What you guys do is incredible. And that's really what this is about. It's incredible people, incredible conversations, and incredible people. So I'm honored. I look forward to our next conversation, and hit stop now.